No, I'm afraid I'm going to be very rigid about one question per questioner. There are lots of people lined up, and I'm only going to get through a fraction of them, so I'm going to go over to the left-hand microphone. One question per questioner, please.
Yes, so this is for the capitalists. I'm curious about your concept of reality. I mean, what happens if you're just an average family growing up and you happen to have a mentally handicapped child? You didn't plan on one, but it came along. You don't have any money, so I guess we'll just throw it in the garbage and pretend it doesn't exist. I wonder what happens in the case of a Canadian Indian who's kind of hanging out there, you know, doing whatever he's doing. These white guys come along and go, hey, you can't do that. You know, I mean, just because you have money and own something, does that mean that you forget about everybody else? Okay, sorry, I blew it. We all make mistakes. The question is... What are you going to do about the people who don't have the money to afford certain medical, educational things? Are you just going to forget about them and just let them do whatever?
Well, I think that we covered that, but I'll answer it again briefly. You either have to believe that human beings, by and large, and in the majority, can survive by their own effort, or that the whole human race is congenital incompetence, handicapped, and helpless. If the latter is true, there is no such thing as human survival. If it's possible for the human race to survive at all, and it is, it has to be because the normal case is an individual who is not handicapped or mentally retarded or run over by a truck, who is able to afford the things that his life requires when he becomes an adult and becomes productive. In the case, as I was about to say, I thought that happened, I was told that happened only in the United States, not in Canada. In the case of people who are handicapped and in difficulty through no fault of their own, they depend upon private charity. That is it. There is no, I do not regard that, such a thing as a handicap, as a mortgage on anybody else's life. I myself would voluntarily give to charity if I thought the person didn't create his own handicap. I would, on the grounds that it's not. But I oppose on principle the idea that a social system is to be defined by what happens to the handicapped. The social system has to be defined by the nature of man. And only when that question has been answered and you lay down the principles that a healthy human being requires to function, do you say the surplus will voluntarily be given to those relatively small group of people who are helpless through no fault of their own. As far as medical care is involved, try to remember that we do not have capitalism now, and the fantastic escalating costs, particularly for people who are unemployed, is not a phenomenon of capitalism, but of the mixed economy.
The two last questions come together, in fact, I think. I want to just pick up, sorry, can you hear? I wanted to pick up Jill's point for a second. We are an interdependent community, as I see it. You're sitting in this hall tonight because the government of Ontario gave money to the University of Toronto to build it. When you go home today, you're going to perhaps take a taxi that's inspected by the Metropolitan Toronto Licensing Commission. It's also paid for by taxpayers' money. In every part of our life, each of us benefits and is affected by the structure that's been built in this society. That may be the problem, but you'd be a lot unhappier without that problem. I've been in places that don't have that problem. And in return, you have the right to expect that you owe somebody something. And I want to tell you, there are most people in the hall, I tell from the applause, we know this, who don't believe it, who don't share this, and I don't care, but I think what John Ridpath and I think what Dr. Peikoff are talking about is such an ugly and mean and heartless system. It is such a throwback to that 19th century Dickensian world that one of these guys lauded as the apotheosis of capitalism earlier, when in fact life was miserable and scummy for most people, that I am thrilled to know that this is a very narrow extremist fringe of the right movement, and that most of its advocates are in this room tonight. That gives me hope. That gives me hope that this kind of miserable way of wanting to run a world will not prevail much beyond where it goes in this room.